23 feet. That is how wide the pavement gets on parts of a Colorado highway that still carries 18-wheelers, tour buses, and motorcycles between two mountain towns separated by 11,018 feet of elevation. There is no guardrail along the worst of it. Not because the state forgot to build one, because for most of the year, any guardrail bolted to that shoulder would already be buried under snow that has to be pushed off the edge, not around it. In an average winter, this stretch of road catches roughly 300 inches of snow, and Colorado keeps it open anyway. Plow crews working through the night so that a town of fewer than 1,000 people doesn't lose its only lifeline to the outside world. This is the $1 Million Highway. 25 miles of asphalt threaded between Silverton and Ouray, Colorado, through some of the steepest, most exposed terrain any paved road in America is asked to survive. And in less than 3 months in the summer of 2025, this one stretch took 3 lives. If you're watching this from somewhere flat, somewhere with shoulders and guardrails and a horizon you can actually see all the way to, go ahead and subscribe now, because that's exactly why this channel exists, to take you to the roads that flat country never prepared you for. And if you've driven this one yourself on the way to Telluride or Durango or just chasing a photograph, tell me in the comments exactly where you were on the road when your hands tightened on the wheel. Now, back to the mountain. Picture the drive itself for a moment. You leave Ouray on a 2-lane road that feels ordinary for the first mile or two, and then the canyon walls start closing in on both sides at once. The pavement climbs in switchbacks cut directly into rock that was blasted, not graded, so the curves are tighter than modern highway design would ever allow. On your left, the mountain rises almost straight up. On your right, in the sections that matter most, there is nothing. No guardrail. Sometimes no painted shoulder line at all. Just a strip of asphalt, and then several hundred feet of open air before the canyon floor. Your headlights, on the stretches you'll drive at dusk or in fog, reach maybe 200 or 300 feet ahead of you. The curve, waiting beyond that reach, is often tighter than the distance you can actually see. The road begins, depending on which direction you take it, in one of 2 former mining towns tucked into the San Juan Mountains. Silverton sits at just over 9,300 feet, boxed in by peaks on every side, a town that still runs in large part on the tourists who come to ride its narrow-gauge railroad and the ones brave enough to drive out the other side. Ouray sits lower, at just under 8,000 feet, in a valley so tight that locals call it the Switzerland of America. Between them runs U.S. Highway 550 and the 25 miles that connect the 2 towns are what the world knows as the $1 Million Highway. It is not the entire route. US 550 itself runs 305 miles, from Bernalillo, New Mexico, all the way to Montrose, Colorado, and it forms part of the larger San Juan Skyway Scenic Byway. But this middle section, climbing over Red Mountain Pass, past 2 smaller summits at Molas Pass and Coal Bank Pass, and down through the walls of Uncompahgre Gorge, is the part that earned the name and the part that earned the reputation. Drive it start to finish in good weather without stopping, and it takes at least 45 minutes. Almost nobody drives it without stopping. The road exists because of silver and gold. In the 1880s, the mountains between Silverton and Ouray were producing ore, and ore needed a way out of the mountains and down to a railhead. The first attempt to build a route across those cliffs came from the Ouray and San Juan Wagon Road Company in 1880. They got partway up what contemporary accounts called impassable terrain, and then by 1882 they had run out of money. That's when Otto Miers entered the story. Miers had already earned the nickname the Pathfinder of the San Juans for the difficult roads he had carved through this range, and in 1882 he bought a controlling stake in the failing project. He brought in a larger, more experienced crew and put them to work with dynamite, blasting a path through solid rock at a cost that, for the most difficult 8.5 miles, ran to roughly $40,000 a mile, a staggering sum for the era, and part of where the road's name likely comes from. He completed the Ouray Side Road, running up through Uncompahgre Canyon toward Red Mountain in September of 1883, at a total cost of nearly $10,000 a mile. The following year, Silverton hired him to build the connecting stretch from the other direction, and by November of 1884, the two halves met at the summit of Red Mountain Pass. Miers ran the finished route as a toll road for several years, charging $5 for a team and wagon, $2.50 for a trail wagon, and $1 for a single saddle horse. He deliberately narrowed the road near Bear Creek Falls, about 3 miles south of Ouray, so that travelers couldn't slip around his toll gate without paying, and his gatehouse there doubled as a small store selling whiskey and cigars to anyone waiting to cross. Locals and merchants who had helped fund the original project eventually turned on him over the fees, and by 1887, San Juan County and the state took over maintenance and ended his control of the pass. The road was fully paved by 1935, and it has carried traffic, first freight wagons and stagecoaches, then early automobiles, now RVs and long-haul trucks, every year since, past the ghost town of Ironton, abandoned along the route since the mining boom faded. The first person reported to have driven the route in a car was a doctor, sometime around 1910 or 1911, piloting a Model T over the pass to make a house call in one of the mining camps, on a road that, at the time, had been built for horses and wagons, not engines. Even the highway's name has never been fully settled. Some say it comes from the cost of blasting the road out of rock. Others say it comes from the gold and silver tailings mixed into the gravel roadbed itself, worth a fortune by the standards of the time. And at least one version of the story says the name comes from a traveler who, after surviving the drive once, swore he wouldn't do it again for $1 million. What makes it dangerous today isn't mystery. It's geometry and weather stacked on top of each other. From Silverton, the road climbs to the summit of Red Mountain Pass at 11,018 feet, then drops roughly 3,000 feet on the descent into Ouray, much of it along the edge of Uncompahgre Gorge, where the canyon floor sits hundreds of feet below the pavement. In several places, the road narrows to 23 feet across, 2 lanes with essentially no room for error. No paved shoulder to recover onto if a tire drifts wide, and nothing beyond the white line but air. There are no guardrails along the most exposed cliff sections, and that absence is deliberate, not neglected. Guardrails would have to be removed and reinstalled every winter to allow snow plows to push accumulated snow directly off the roadway and down the mountainside. And on a route that averages around 300 inches of snowfall a year, pulling that hardware on and off twice a season simply isn't practical. So the engineering trade-off that keeps the road passable in January is the same trade-off that removes any barrier between a driver's tires and the drop beyond them in July. Layered on top of the narrow lanes and the missing guardrails are grades that, in places, exceed 6%, steep enough to strain brakes on any vehicle, and especially punishing for the trucks and trailers that use the route as a shortcut through the San Juans. Steep grades like these make braking harder for everyone, but they're particularly unforgiving for commercial trucks not built for sustained mountain descents. Add sudden, localized weather that can drop visibility to almost nothing in minutes, even in summer, and you have a road where the margin for error was never generous to begin with. Then there's the avalanche exposure, which is its own category of risk entirely, separate from the cliffs. This stretch of the San Juan Mountains is considered one of the most avalanche-prone corridors in the lower 48 states, according to FEMA's own Avalanche Hazard Index. Snow here doesn't just fall, it slides in defined paths that cross the highway itself, sometimes with almost no warning. One of those paths, known as the East Riverside Slide, has a documented history that stretches back more than 60 years. On March 3, 1963, the Reverend Marvin Hudson was driving towards Silverton with his two daughters, ages 11 and 17, to fulfill a pastoral duty when the East Riverside Slide let go and swept all three of them to their deaths, roughly 1,000 feet down the mountainside. A marker still stands along the highway near where they were found. The same slide path claimed 2 more lives in the years that followed, both of them snowplow operators doing the job that keeps the road open in winter. 36-year-old Robert F. Miller, killed on March 2, 1970, an event that moved the mayor of Ouray at the time to write a song called Riverside Slide, and 28-year-old Harry L. Kishbaugh, killed in the same location on February 10, 1978. It took those 5 deaths spread across 15 years before a protective snowshed was finally engineered and built to shield that stretch of road from the slide path above it, a structure that still stands today, a permanent acknowledgement that this particular curve of highway could not be made safe any other way. The modern record on the $1 Million Highway is a mix of near misses and tragedies that keep happening in the same handful of miles. On January 13, 2024, a professional snowboarder named Pat Milbury was driving his 2006 Toyota 4Runner over Red Mountain Pass during a blizzard when a sudden hurricane-like gust of wind blinded him completely. He couldn't see anything through the windshield. He felt his tires slip off the pavement. Crawling at maybe 7 miles an hour, he suddenly found both driver's side tires hanging off the edge of the road, the truck teetering above the canyon below. Instinct from years of snowboarding took over. Rather than fight to pull the truck back onto the pavement, which he judged would likely roll it, he made the deliberate decision to let it go over the edge in a controlled way, the same way he would drop into a steep slope on a board. The 4Runner slid several hundred feet down the mountainside and came to rest in a grove of trees above a cliff. He survived. He later said he was extremely thankful to be alive and that he probably shouldn't have been. Others weren't as fortunate. On August 5, 2025, just after 8 in the morning, a silver Honda Civic was traveling near milepost 88, about 5 miles south of Ouray, on a stretch of the highway that local rock climbers have nicknamed the Waterfall, a landmark well known to anyone who climbs the cliff bands above Red Mountain Creek. According to a later investigation, the driver was reversing the vehicle when a tire slipped off the edge of the road. The car rolled an estimated 320 feet down the mountainside and came to rest upside down in Red Mountain Creek in the valley far below the pavement. 2 adults in the car died, 42-year-old Louis Michael and 79-year-old Leoba Valdez, both from New Mexico. A juvenile girl who had been riding in the vehicle was pulled from the wreckage by rescue crews and confirmed rescued at 11:27 that morning, then taken to a nearby hospital. The highway was closed in both directions for much of the day while crews worked the difficult remote recovery. Investigators later ordered a follow-up autopsy on the driver, which found a level of Delta-9 THC in his system reported to be roughly 40 times the state's legal limit for driving. 18 days later, on August 23, 2025, 65-year-old Olga Kramer was killed in a motorcycle crash near milepost 90, roughly 3 miles south of Ouray, barely 2 miles up the road from where the Honda Civic had gone over the edge less than 3 weeks earlier. Kramer split her time between Mountain Village, near Telluride, and Phoenix, Arizona. Local officials released few details about how the crash happened. 2 women, 2 crashes, 2 miles of highway, 19 days apart, in the same short stretch of the same mountain pass. A coincidence of geography that locals who drive this road every week would tell you isn't really a coincidence at all. Then, on October 9th, 2025, it happened again in almost the same place. A pickup truck went off the side of US 550 between mileposts 88 and 89, the same short stretch, near the protective snow shed built decades earlier to guard against avalanches, not against vehicles simply leaving the road under their own power. The truck fell 300 feet into the Uncompahgre River Gorge. Ouray County EMS, the Ouray Volunteer Fire Department, and the Ouray Mountain Rescue Team responded and used a technical rope system to bring the sole occupant back up to the roadway from the canyon floor. Photographs from the scene show the truck folded almost beyond recognition against the rocks. Despite the appearance of the wreck, the driver walked away with only minor injuries. Here's where the story gets more honest than most videos about this road are willing to be. The $1 Million Highway has a reputation that outruns its statistics, and even Colorado's own press has said so in plain language. In 2025, a ranking published by a website called Find My Plate placed US 552nd among the 10 deadliest roads in the entire United States, trailing only a stretch of US Route 1 in Florida. But when the Denver Gazette covered that ranking, its own reporting pushed back on it, noting that the road's deadly reputation might be, in the paper's own words, a bit overblown, since other Colorado highways account for more actual deaths every year. And since some locals would argue a nearby unpaved route, Black Bear Pass is genuinely harder to survive than the $1 Million Highway itself. The hard numbers back up the pushback. A tally of crashes on the Red Mountain Pass stretched between 1995 and 2010, a full 15 years, found 302 accidents total. Of those, only 8 were fatal, killing 9 people in all. Compare that to U.S. Highway 287 north of Fort Collins, nicknamed the Highway of Death, which logged 570 crashes and 15 fatal ones in just 5 years, on a road roughly the same length. Or compare it to the single deadliest stretch of road in the entire state, a 10-mile section of Interstate 70 through northeast Denver, which recorded 23 fatal crashes in 5 years alone, inside a city at highway speed with guardrails running the entire way. By raw body count over the long term, the $1 Million Highway is not Colorado's deadliest road, and there is no documented credible ranking anywhere that puts it ahead of every mountain pass in the Rockies. What it has instead is something a crash count alone can't measure. On I-70 through Denver, a driver who drifts out of a lane typically hits another car, or a barrier, or a shoulder. On the $1 Million Highway, a driver who drifts 18 inches too far can go over the edge of a canyon with no guardrail to catch the car and no shoulder to correct back onto, into a fall of 300 feet or more, in a place where the nearest ambulance may be 20 minutes away, on a road that sometimes allows only one lane of traffic at a time. The danger here was never really about frequency. It's about the almost complete absence of a second chance once something goes wrong. If you're the kind of person who wants the real numbers behind a road like this, not just the version that goes viral, this channel is built for people like you. Go ahead and subscribe before we keep going, because there's more mountain left to cover. What ties the recent incidents together isn't randomness spread evenly across 25 miles. It's concentration in a very specific place. The fatal crash of August 5th, the motorcycle death of August 23rd, and the survivable plunge of October 9th all happened within a 2-mile radius of each other. in the corridor between mileposts 88 and 90 on the Ouray side of Red Mountain Pass, the same general stretch where the East Riverside slide killed 5 people across the 20th century, and where a snowshed now stands as a permanent monument to a threat the road has only partially solved. Official Colorado State Patrol data covering the 14-mile core of this route between 2013 and 2023 recorded 143 total crashes, 38 of them causing injury and 8 of them fatal. A real steady toll concentrated in the same short section year after year. Separate data from the Colorado Department of Transportation covering the 15-mile stretch south of Ouray between 2020 and 2024 found 53 crashes, 33 of which involved a vehicle leaving the roadway entirely. The pattern is a specific, repeatable combination: unforgiving grades, a narrowing roadway, and a drop-off that begins the instant a tire leaves the pavement, playing out again and again in the same few miles. Decade after decade, Colorado hasn't ignored the problem. The state runs a dedicated avalanche forecasting operation for this stretch of highway, among the most active avalanche mitigation programs in the country, closing the road proactively when conditions turn dangerous, rather than waiting for a slide to hit traffic that's already on the pavement. Crews plow the route through the winter, sometimes multiple times in a single day, and warning signs line the most exposed sections telling drivers not to stop beneath known avalanche chutes. The posted 25-mile-an-hour speed limit through the narrowest stretches isn't a suggestion. It's the state formally acknowledging that this particular road cannot be driven the way a normal 2-lane highway can. And yet, the fundamental trade-off remains unchanged since Otto Miers blasted the first mile of it out of solid rock in 1883. This is still the only paved route connecting Silverton to the outside world in winter, so it cannot simply be closed for safety and left that way. It has to stay open, snow or no snow, guardrail or no guardrail, because an entire town's mail, groceries, and medical access depend on it. In the summer, the same narrow lanes fill with a completely different kind of traffic. Motorcyclists drawn by the scenery, RV drivers pulling trailers they've never taken above 8,000 feet before, cyclists training for mountain races, and photographers pulled onto shoulders that barely exist to catch the view down into the gorge. None of them are moving at the speeds that make interstates dangerous. Almost all of the danger here comes instead from a single wrong decision made at low speed, in a place that offers no room to recover from it. It's worth saying, too, that the $1 Million Highway doesn't stand alone in this part of the state. It sits inside a wider network of Colorado mountain passes with similar reputations. Wolf Creek Pass to the southeast, Loveland Pass along I-70, and the unpaved four-wheel drive only Schofield Pass a bit further north, connecting Marble and Crested Butte, a route so difficult it was once nicknamed the SOB Trail and has taken more than a dozen lives of its own over the decades. The $1 Million Highway isn't an isolated anomaly. It's one entry, a particularly well-known one, in a much longer list of Colorado roads where elevation, weather, and geology combine to punish the smallest mistake. There's no serious plan to reroute the $1 Million Highway, and there likely never will be. The terrain that makes it dangerous, the narrow gorge, the 11,000-foot pass, the avalanche paths crossing the road at multiple points, is the same terrain that makes any alternative route effectively impossible to engineer or afford. So, the road stays exactly as it is. 25 miles of 2-lane blacktop, as narrow as 23 feet in places, climbing 3,000 feet above a canyon floor with nothing but paint and a speed limit sign standing between a driver and the edge. Every summer, tourists in rental cars and RVs unfamiliar with mountain grades take the same curves that killed 2 people in a single crash in August of 2025. Every winter, plow operators, doing the same job that claimed 2 lives in the 1970s, go back out onto Red Mountain Pass in whiteout conditions most drivers would never willingly enter. 23 feet. That's still the width of the road at its narrowest point, the same measurement we opened with, and it hasn't changed since the highway was carved out of these cliffs almost a century and a half ago. This road isn't the deadliest in Colorado by the numbers, and it isn't the deadliest mountain pass in the Rockies either. The documented statistics don't support that claim, and honest reporting on this road has said so directly. But the statistics were never really the point. What they miss is simpler, and in its own way, more unsettling. On most roads, a small mistake costs you a dented fender. On this one, for 25 miles, that same small mistake can cost you everything, and there is no barrier built to stop it. And the nearest help may be a long way down a mountain road behind you. If you ever drive the $1 Million highway between Ouray and Silverton, keep both hands on the wheel. Keep your speed under the limit even when the road looks completely empty. And remember that the drop beside you doesn't care how careful the driver in front of you was. If you've made that drive yourself, tell me in the comments exactly where you were on that stretch of road, and whether, knowing everything you know now, you'd get behind the wheel and do it again.